This video is part of a larger series wherein I will be watching and giving you my thoughts about every Studio Ghibli movie. And today I watched Heisei Tanuki Gassen Poko, or Poko, and spoilers. So parts 1 through 7 of this series were all stockpiled up before I had to leave on vacation in the span of like 5 days, which meant that I was watching and writing about an average of more than one movie per day, which meant that I really needed to be efficient with my time. Like, I would be taking notes and writing the script in my head while I was watching the movie, and while I think a lot of people do this to a lesser extent with just about everything they watch, I could definitely feel a difference in my experience between the other Ghibli films I've watched so far and Poko in this regard. Namely that I took breaks while watching this movie. Now, this definitely had some effect on my experience with the movie to some extent, but I don't think it was big enough that my takes on it won't make any sense. Plus, I think it actually improved my experience with the film overall, which I think is justification enough, but I guess I should be clear on why I felt the need to pause this movie at several instances. Now, I know that what I'm about to say is going to sound like I hate this movie, so I need to make it clear that that's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you guys the truth. I was about to fall asleep. I just found it incredibly difficult to keep track of and make sense of everything going on in this film, to the point that I found myself just completely disengaging pretty regularly. Like, every time a new character or set piece or plot point came up, I was just like, wait, how did we get here? This could very well be because of the dub I watched, though I do get the feeling that no matter how good the dub, this is one of those movies where the dialogue will always seem a little off because it's rooted very much in the original language and how it works. So yeah, I found myself frequently getting bored because, like, the plot, as far as I could tell, was relatively simple. Humans are destroying the forest where raccoons live, and the raccoons try to prevent that from happening in one way or another. But I think the issue for me arose from the fact that none of their plans really progress the plot except the whole giant goblin festival thing. Like, it felt like the entire first half of the film was just like, let's stop the humans. Then they execute a plan. It ultimately doesn't ward off the humans from continuing to destroy the forest. The raccoons regroup, think of another plan, etc., etc. And new characters, settings, and plot points are introduced, but it always felt like it was coming out of nowhere to me. I didn't understand the logic behind many of the raccoons' plans, and I never got particularly endeared into any of them because none of them seemed to get more than surface level characterization. Like, one of the best parts of the movie for me was when Shokichi and that girl raccoon that I forget the name of had that little segment where they fall in love and have kids, and even that's just a pretty basic story without any real build-up from earlier in the film. Though I did like how them having kids was initially framed as a positive thing, but then later on it's kind of recontextualized when it's reestablished how much land the raccoons are losing to the humans, compounded by the fact that their population has gone up due to the next generation being born. But still, for the most part, I was struggling to get engaged and be like, oh man, what if this character that I really care about fails at their mission? I hope that doesn't happen. I feel tension in this story, because I didn't really care about any of the raccoons in particular. There's so many characters that no one really gets enough screen time, and I think it's really a shame because there's a ton of potential here. I really love the clashing ideologies between Gonta and Shokichi. I love Oroku and everything to do with her role of authority in the village. I obviously love the idea of Shokichi starting a family. I just wish that the creators would have committed more to one idea and like cut out the fat, then made sure to stick the landing on that idea. Now, there is of course the central theme of environmentalism, but I feel like even that has its own issues, specifically in that the movie doesn't really take the message further than be nice to the environment, even though it had ample time to do more and explore it with more depth. Like, if in your 2-hour-long movie you feel the need to have one of the characters basically exposit the themes of the movie in dialogue while looking directly at the camera, maybe more could have been done there, just saying. Though I do have to give this movie props, partially for including such a theme at all, because I really like the environmentalism message and I think it should have more exposure. But also because the film was willing to give its characters a kinda unhappy ending for the sake of making that theme sink in as much as possible, which it absolutely does, even without the speaking directly to the audience thing. Okay, so like, most of my issues with this movie are about what the events contribute to the narrative, and less so the events themselves, and I'd be willing to bet that this is because Poko is obviously steeped in a huge amount of Eastern mythology, religion, etc., and I'm just a big dumb American who can't appreciate the extra layer of meaning behind most of the scenes in this film, and yeah, that's probably entirely accurate. Like, I'm sure that in all the parts of this movie where I was going, how did we even get here? Somebody else was going, of course that's what would happen. I also really like how the integration into human society thing was handled in this movie. It was one of the few parts that I felt moved along at a nice pace, and it paid off really well when some of the raccoons actually decide to do just that when they no longer have the option of living in the forest. It reminded me a lot of the video Shrek is Queer Culture and Here's Why by Corvidae, which is a great video that you should totally check out. I was specifically thinking about how some queer people reject society's expectations of them, them, which alienates them, and how some confine to them in order to fit better into society. I'm not going to go into any detail here, that's just so that you can get an idea of what my thought process was while watching this movie, also in case you wanted to watch Corvet's video. Anyway, I guess presentation is the next topic to discuss, and I feel like I'm in a bit of a weird position here. So like, I've been watching all these Studio Ghibli movies, and all of them are gorgeous, including Poko, but I'm getting a little scared that Ghibli's style is kinda wearing out on me. My favorite visual parts of the past few movies have all been about whatever that film does differently from Ghibli's other works, even though pretty much every entry in their library has been fantastic in pretty much every way, shape, and form visually, but like, it's as if I'm getting desensitized to how good these movies look. I gotta watch some seasonal shows to remind myself of what most anime looks like. But yeah, Poko looks amazing. I love the animations of the raccoons when they go into realistic animal mode, and every time they transition into a person or object, which happens all the time. In terms of sound, I don't think there's really anything special about this movie. I didn't notice any standout musical pieces, sound effects, or voice acting. In fact, I felt like the voices of the characters were kinda ill-fitting and janky. Not that the actor or actress wasn't skilled, it's just that sometimes it felt like their voice didn't like fit the character that it was coming out of, even though the voice acting was still good. It also sometimes sounded like the characters were closer to the camera than they actually were. Maybe I'm crazy in just imagining this, but either way, it's a very minor nitpick. Ultimately, I want to say that I liked this movie because the ending left me with a nice sense of closure and incorporated elements of the film that had been previously set up, but when I take a step back and really consider how disinterested I was for the majority of the film, I don't think I'd feel comfortable giving it anything other than a 5 out of 10. It didn't feel like it made very efficient use of its time, which was especially disappointing considering this film is almost twice as long as the last movie I watched from Studio Ghibli, and the length of this film is probably the biggest issue I have with it. It just didn't feel like the movie really justified its length to me, and this caused me to come away from this movie feeling pretty neutrally about it. Still, it absolutely had its moments, so I definitely wouldn't say this movie is bad. It just could have done a lot better at appealing to my preferences, which is why this is just my score, and it's how I felt about the movie. Anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say on Poko. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts about this movie down in the comment section if you're watching these films along with me or had already seen this one. Also, like I mentioned, I'm back from vacation as of making this video, and I would like to keep releasing each part in this series as regularly as they have been coming out, but I'd also like to keep making quote-unquote regular videos, so I might end up splitting my time a bit. I don't know, I don't really have all the kinks worked out at the time of writing this script. Maybe I'll have a schedule for when the rest of these videos are set to drop in the description, so check that, I guess. And in the next installment of watching every Ghibli movie, I will be trying my hand at Mimi wo Sumaseba, or Whisper of the Heart. But with that said, thank you guys for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.